Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the early 1800s and the Great Expedition. This is going to be fun. We want you to sing along, clap along, tap along. If you don't know the words, that's okay. You can just make them up. And our first song is a favorite traditional, O Shenandoah. Now, there's been a lot of mystery around this song. Where did it come from? What's it really about? And but most musicologists believe that it came from French-Canadian fur traders. And the story is that a fur trader fell in love with the daughter of Oneida Chief Shenandoah. But Chief Shenandoah wasn't having any part of that, those two coming together, so he forbid his daughter to see the fur trader. So the song, O Shenandoah, becomes the fur trader's lamentation. So enjoy the show.
O Shenandoah, I long to hear you way rolling river. O Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away we're bound to go, cross the wide Missouri. O Shenandoah, I love your daughter. Since the last I see thee, way rolling river. 'Tis 7 long years since the last I see thee. Away we're bound to go, across the wide Missouri. To leave you way rolling river. Oh Shenandoah, I'll not deceive you. Away we're bound to go, cross the wide Missouri. I long to hear you way rolling river. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away we're bound to go, cross the wide Missouri. Across the wide Missouri. Jefferson at your service. My dear citizens, there is a mountain in the state called South Dakota which has chiseled upon its face the facsimile of 4 men, all of whom would become president of this country. I was surprised to see my features among that group. Now, the choice of these 4 presidents, I've been told, was of the opinion that they were responsible for some of the greatest events in our nation's history. But why me? I didn't even want to become president. Oh, it's true, I did author the Declaration of Independence, although I thought that Dr. Benjamin Franklin should write it, as he is so well liked and admired and world-renowned. But when approached on that subject, Dr. Franklin said never again would he write anything subject to committee review. Now, that's a caution I should entertain. Well, that left either John Adams or me for the task. Adams said that I should do it because I have a peculiar felicity for expression. Yeah, I do like words. Well, nonetheless, I agreed to author the Declaration. It was submitted to the Continental Congress, where it was debated for 3 days. Now, that was one of the most humiliating experiences in my life. I listened as these ambitious men debated every word, every punctuation, every phrase, every idea, until in the end they reduced the document by a quarter, including a paragraph that would have ended slavery. Unable to reconcile the ideal of freedom for all with the economic value of slavery, 2 of the Continental Congress refused to vote for it, and where a unanimous vote was required for passage. Many people still criticize the Declaration, and perhaps rightfully so, where on one hand it speaks of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and on the other hand, it failed to abolish slavery. Well, the irony isn't lost upon me. Most of the Continental Congress, including myself, were slave owners. Is it possible to be remembered for our goodness rather than our worst mistakes? That discussion we'll save for another story. So, was the writing of the Declaration of Independence my greatest accomplishment? Some say my greatest accomplishment was the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of this country. But before we get into that discussion, I'd like to first tell you about the Corps of Discovery and the Great Expedition. Now, I had a vision of an unbroken water passage across the continent, from the Atlantic Ocean in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west, a passageway that would allow for free trade along the continent and beyond, and encourage trade with the indigenous tribes along the way. I received permission from Congress to organize a group of individuals that would explore and ascertain whether a passageway was possible. In essence, it was a commerce expedition. But in order to gain cooperation from France, Britain, and Spain, the countries that lay claim to that land, I described it as a scientific exploration. This was no ruse. I was indeed extremely interested in everything about that expansive land. I wanted to know more about the plant life, the animal life, the indigenous peoples, the climate, the geography. I wondered too if woolly mammoths and mastodons might still roam that land. Well, I appointed my trustworthy personal secretary, Meriwether Lewis, to lead the mission. Both Lewis and I have an affinity for exploration and science. He, in turn, named William Clark his co-commander. Now, the Secretary of War was against the co-leader, but Lewis said Clark must be treated as an equal, in every way. I thought that a wise decision. Presently, I'm preparing orders for Meriwether, page after page of precise instruction. Well, it's true, I'm a bit of a micromanager. However, it's fortuitous that Lewis and I both have a passion for lists. Preparations are being made for departure from St. Louis in the spring of 1804. What wonders await the core of discovery?
Sons rejoice, the tyrants never bend the knee. Join in heart and soul and voice for Jefferson and liberty. Columbia sons rejoice, to tyrants never bend the knee. Join in heart and soul and voice for Jefferson and liberty.
A micromanager indeed. President Jefferson sent lists to and instructions to Lewis for gathering information along the way. Made detailed observations of geography, weather, soil, minerals, animals, birds, and the list went on and on. When encountering indigenous tribes, endeavor to make yourself acquainted, as far as a diligent pursuit of our journey shall admit. Collect information on populations, languages, food, clothing, housing, laws, customs, trading practices, occupations, agriculture, fishing, hunting, war, arts, physical appearance, diseases, state of morality, religion, and more, much more. Well, Lewis and Clark would do their best, considering the West was neither uninhabited wilderness, nor did its population consist of a single indigenous world. The native tribes were many different peoples, not one monolithic culture. They were as varied as the Western landscape itself. Over the course of the expedition, Lewis and Clark would encounter nearly 50 different indigenous tribes. In preparation for the journey, Lewis took crash courses in medicine, astronomy, mapping, surveying, the identification and preservation of botanical specimens, fossils, and how to search for signs of ancient beasts. He also had to acquire supplies for the journey: scientific instruments, guns, ammunition, medical supplies, material for tents, mosquito netting, portable food, clothing for the men, gifts and trade goods for the Indians they would meet along the way, and more, much more. They would depart from St. Louis with 2 39-foot pirogues and 1 keelboat 55 feet long and 8 feet wide, capable of carrying 12 tons. These boats could be maneuvered by sail, paddle, pole, or tow line. And on May 14th, 1804, Captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, along with 45 men of extraordinary strength and stamina, calling themselves the Corps of Discovery, commenced on a most amazing journey up the Missouri River. Ah, yes, the Missouri. It is long, wide, dangerous, and wildly scenic. It will push relentlessly at more than 5 miles an hour in the opposite direction. Maneuvering a keelboat against such an insistent current will be a constant challenge. Sometimes when the weather's fine, they can sail upriver, but more often than not, they will have to use paddles or poles, avoiding the main channel by moving slowly from eddy to eddy. Sometimes the only way to proceed was by cordelling. The men would walk along the muddy banks of the river and pull those heavy boats along with ropes. Drifting logs would ram the boats, the cordelling ropes would snap, the mast would get caught in an overhanging tree branch and break off. The keelboat would get stranded on sandbars and nearly be overturned by a collapsing riverbank. Oh, the Missouri. It is a beast. Big, broad, and beautiful.
It was a most amazing coincidence. In 1802, I dispatched an envoy to Paris to negotiate with Bonaparte over the port of New Orleans. Now, all our nation's commerce went down rivers to Mississippi and eventually to New Orleans, where then the cargo was loaded onto ocean-going ships. I was concerned that France, who owned the port, might close it to the United States or start charging for the use of it. To my surprise, my envoys returned with the entirety of the French holdings on this land, all 828,000 square miles of it. Why, I had sanctioned my advisors to go as high as $11 million for the port alone, but they want the whole lot for $15 million. Do the math. That's 2.8 cents per acre. It surprised everyone. Even the European countries were saying, whoa, what just happened here? Well, Bonaparte was gearing up for war with Britain and needed the cash. It was just our good fortune to take advantage of his fire sale. Now, not everyone thought that was such a good idea. In fact, I received a lot of criticism. I was accused of buying land we did not need with money we did not have. Hamilton thought me an impractical dreamer. They did not have my vision. Now the Corps of Discovery will be exploring on American soil, well, at least to the Great Rocky Mountains. On Friday, March 9th, 1804, in a brief ceremony in New Orleans, the French flag was lowered and the Stars and Stripes hoisted as the United States took possession of the outpost. And we say, adieu à la France, or farewell to France.
Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'appelle. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'attend. Derrière chez nous, y a tout le temps. Derrière chez nous, y a tout le temps. Toi, beau canard sans fond nageant. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'appelle. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'attend. Le fil du roi s'en va chanson. Le fil du roi va sans chant. Avec son grand fusil argent. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'appelle. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'attend. Visa le noir, tu as le blanc. Visa le noir, tu as le blanc. Au fil du roi, tu es méchant. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'appelle. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'attend. D'avoir tué mon canard blanc, d'avoir tué mon canard blanc, par-dessus le perd son sang. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'appelle. Plein beau vent, plein joli vent, plein beau vent, Merlin m'attend. Par les yeux luisants des diamants, par les yeux luisants des diamants, et par le bec l'or et l'argent. Plein beau vent,
Lewis and Clark were seasoned soldiers with wilderness experience. But who were the men they hired to comprise the Corps of Discovery? Well, there were three types. Soldiers. Now, after the American Revolution, soldiering in the ranks wasn't considered an especially honorable profession. Frontier armies were populated with failures, misfits, and troublemakers. Military officers often found themselves saddled with rowdy, bad-smelling, foul-mouthed troops. William Clark had enough military experience to assume that the officers might be easily tempted to get rid of their worst mischief makers. And indeed, the men who were volunteered for the expedition were not quite the quality Clark was hoping for. Then we have the Kentuckians, rifle-toting independent frontiersmen. Not so much when it comes to following orders. They place highest value on independence and personal survival. No man worth his powder would stoop so low as to take orders from others. And thirdly, we have the voyageur, the French boatman. Mythology has them painted as daring, bold, and colorful. But the jaunty, devil-may-care voyageur of the Great Lakes were not the same as those hired by Lewis and Clark in St. Louis. These were an entirely different breed. These were insolent fellows, driven by greed, undisciplined, impertinent, ill-behaved vagabonds. And there you have it. Our Corps.
Whiskey, 50 cents for beer, 50 cents for morphine, so bring some over here.
Hard-bitten soldiers scrappy frontiersmen, unpredictable boatmen. Not exactly a crew to inspire confidence. Lewis and Clark expected trouble, but they hoped that a winter of training at Camp Dubois would iron out the difficulties. Christmas 1803 in Camp Dubois showed the rank and file at their absolute worst. Drinking, fighting, insubordination, desertion. 1 year later, Christmas 1804 in Fort Mandan, it was an entirely different story. Sergeant Ordway described Christmas at Fort Mandan as all peace and tranquility. Well, what the heck happened? How do you go from drinking on duty, sleeping on guard, fighting, insubordination, desertion, to all peace and tranquility? Well, it was due in part, at least, to Lewis and Clark themselves. Their many years of military experience taught them the value of discipline and order. They implemented drills, parades, inspections, court-martials, all in an effort to instill a sense of unity from above. But discipline from above cannot build common purpose or shared destiny. Lewis and Clark needed men who were reliable, not resentful. The mission of the expedition called for men who were willing to be responsible for their own lives as well as the lives of others. Lewis and Clark included the men in major decision-making, and when disciplinary procedures called for sentencing, the men themselves administered it. Now, all of this helped form the Corps, but what really mattered were those moments when all had to pull together for the common good. It is that feeling of community that comes when surviving a terrible storm together, or as a team pushing through a treacherous part of the river, or sharing a close call in a confrontation with the Teton Sioux. By the time this band of rebellious misfits moved into Fort Mandan just before Christmas 1804, they had a good supply of experienced stories to draw from. Stories they shared. Stories of the tough portages, stories of the mighty river, stories of the prairie dogs, including that one they captured live to send back to President Jefferson. Stories of the plains and the thousands of buffalo as far as the eye could see. Stories of the charms of the Iroquois women. Stories of the taste of that delicious corn. Stories of the tremendous storms that nearly capsized the keelboat. And on and on and on. Stories that connected them. Mutual trust began to grow, the kind of trust that comes from shared experiences. Stories had begun to form the rhythm of their lives. Well, speaking of rhythm, another tremendously binding element for the Corps was music. Fiddle playing and step dancing were major ways in which friendships were built and strengthened. Pierre Cruzat, the Corps' fiddler, was called upon often to provide music for the much-needed release and relaxation brought on by dancing and singing at the end of a hard day or on any day of celebration. Rhythmic voyageur songs used while paddling were a way to develop a unique work identity. Singing while paddling was essential to canoe travel, to set the march, control the pace, synchronize the stroke. Communal paddling songs presented an image of solidarity, connecting the men through cooperation, bridging cultural differences, and fostering that unique work identity. Well, there you have it. Stories and songs. That's what did it. That's what built the camaraderie that led to all peace and tranquility. Now, let's hear one of those French voyageur paddling songs. a chanson d'Aviron, a call and response. Now, whether or not you were a good singer, you were expected to sing while paddling.
All right. Are you ready for the paddling? Paddles up. Oh, Pierre. Ma revenant de la jolie Rochelle,
Riding along the road to Rochelle City,
j'ai rencontré trois jolies demoiselles. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène et qui nous mène.
pull on the oars as we glide along.
J'ai rencontré trois jolies demoiselles.
I met three girls and all of them were pretty.
J'ai pas choisi, mais j'ai pris la plus belle. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène et qui nous mène.
Pull on the oars as we glide along.
J'ai point choisi, mais j'ai pris la plus belle.
By chance I chose the one who was the beauty.
Je lui fis monter derrière moi sur ma selle. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène et qui nous mène.
Pull on the oars as we glide along.
Au beau Saint-Brieuc, elle me mit ma litoire.
After a while, she said like a drink, sir.
Je l'ai menée auprès d'une fontaine. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène et qui nous mène.
Pull on the oars as we glide along.
Je l'ai menée auprès d'une fontaine.
Quickly I found a spring from up the mountain.
Quand elle fut là, elle ne voulut point boire. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène et qui nous mène.
Pull on the oars as we glide along.
Almost there. Je l'ai menée au logis de son père.
So on we rode to find her home and father.
Quand elle fut là, elle buvait à plein verre. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène et qui nous mène.
Pull on the oars as we glide along.
Woo!
Interpreters were a part of the Corps to help the communication process during encounters with Indigenous communities. Was that enough? How could they engage in sustained interactions and cooperate successfully? Music and dancing function as an important platform of positive cross-cultural interaction. Music was clearly the factor that enabled the most positive and mutually satisfying encounters. In contrast to when other forms of exchange, notably of weapons, were the source of misunderstandings and tension. Singing usually signified arrival and departure, a friendly reception, and a fond farewell. At every junction, music was used to convey trust. At reception, gift-giving, trade, and goodbye. The music that was included and facilitated in this process should not be surprising. Music and dancing have been shown to produce oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin in people. Let's take a look at the musical instruments of the expedition. At the height of its popularity around the turn of the 19th century, the violin or fiddle is particularly suited to the conditions of the fur trade era. It is small and light enough for long-distance travel and has longevity with its 4 replaceable strings. Loud enough to project tunes to an entire room of dancers, it is frequently accompanied by the clapping of hands, stomping of feet, or percussion on a drum or kettle. Its appreciation seems to be heightened on this journey when the arrival of Pierre Cruzat and his fiddle invariably causes great excitement. By the way, Pierre was hired by the Corps as a hunter and boatman. Despite his poor eyesight, he is a very good hunter. Except for that one time he accidentally shot Meriwether Lewis in the buttocks, thinking he was an elk. Guitar. Very popular at the time, but mostly owned by nobility, and most popular among women. So it is not likely a guitar was on this journey. Bass. Unfortunately, there was not an extension cord long enough to fit the entire route of the journey. Accordion. Not on this trip. It wasn't patented until 1829. Jaw harp. Definitely on this trip. Washboard. A necessity in more ways than one. Drums. Most assuredly, there were drums. And whistle. Yes. As well as metal kettles, clappers, claves, castanets, spoons, and blacksmith equipment. Really anything that could be used as a percussion instrument. What instruments did the native peoples use? Drums. Drums are the instrument that most bridge our cultural divide. They are a strong conduit of interaction. Drums symbolize, for many indigenous nations, the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Other instruments, a gourd filled with stones, bunches of bones shaken together, and deer hooves fastened to the end of a stick. Let's hear them all together. Let's try that again.
November 1804, the Corps of Discovery arrives at the home of the Mandan and Hidatsa people in what is now central North Dakota. They have been traveling for 6 months and have covered over 1,200 miles upstream from St. Louis. The large keelboat will return to St. Louis from here. It is too cumbersome to be navigated the remainder of the journey. Now the keelboat is packed with plant and animal specimens that have been collected over the past 6 months, including that live prairie dog. These will be travel on to Washington City and be delivered to President Jefferson. Now, despite the fact that the winter of 1804-1805 was bitterly cold, temperatures will dip to 40 degrees below zero. It is still quite a good winter for the Corps. The Mandan and Hidatsa are welcoming, peaceful, highly cultured, and eager to trade. The Corps builds their winter quarters and names it Fort Mandan in honor of the Mandan people. The Mandan and Hidatsa teach the Corps many skills that will serve them well on the next leg of their journey, and they assist them in finding food for the winter. Without that assistance, they surely would have starved. The Corps and the tribes enjoy each other's company often, and it frequently includes singing and dancing. On Christmas Day, the Corps sings and dances the day away, and on New Year's Day, they join the tribes for more singing and dancing. It is all peace and tranquility. It is here at Fort Mandan that Lewis and Clark hire a French interpreter, Toussaint Charbonneau. Charbonneau's native wife, Sacagawea, will also join them on the remainder of the journey, as she is familiar with the language of the Shoshone people, with whom Lewis and Clark hope to negotiate for horses. The Corps will spend 213 days at Fort Mandan and enjoy the great generosity, peace, and friendship of the Mandan and Hidatsa. Lewis and Clark will fondly recall their winter in Fort Mandan as a highlight of the expedition. These most generous and peaceful people will be nearly wiped out by smallpox in 1837. When true to their generous nature, they agreed to care for an ill man who has come by steamboat to a local fur trading post. They have no immunity to this disease. Nearly 90% of the tribe will die of smallpox.
April 1805, the Corps prepares to leave their winter camp. Lewis and Clark had maps of the lower Missouri drawn by earlier fur trading expeditions, but beyond the Mandan villages, they have only information gleaned from the Mandan people who know the country. The most difficult part of their journey will lie ahead. They will experience a nightmarish trip over the Rocky Mountains, and they will witness beauty that takes their breath away. The Great Falls of the Missouri will be described as visionary enchantment. Lewis will say, "It is the grandest sight I ever beheld." They will be shocked when they find that the Rockies are not a single wall of mountains, but range after range after mountainous range. Traveling the 300 miles across the Rockies will be an epic tale of survival. The Bitterroot Range will test them to their very core as they near starvation and are forced to eat some of their horses and then resort to eating their candles. Once again, they will be helped by the kindness of strangers. The Salish people of the Bitterroot will provide them with food. 5 months after leaving Fort Mandan, they will descend the Rocky Mountains to the Columbia River and from there travel on to the Pacific Ocean, where, when first sighted, William Clark will exclaim, "Ocean in view! Oh, the joy!" They will spend the bitterly cold and wet winter of 1805-1806 in the company of the friendly Clatsop people, and after building their quarters, name it in honor of them, Fort Clatsop. They will begin their trip back to St. Louis in March 1806, and 6 months later, the Corps will be greatly celebrated. They will be surprised at the exuberant welcome they received. Unbeknownst to them, most believed the Corps had been lost forever. They had been gone 2 years and 4 months. Through unknown land we proceeded on, and to the very walls of hell. But we stood strong and we carried on, over the hills and far away. O'er the hills and o'er the main, through mountains, streams, and open plains, the core of discovery makes its way, over the hills and far away. An adventurous life tests a man's resolve, our stories and songs stand the test of time. In history books you'll find it all, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, through mountains, streams, and open plains, the core of discovery makes its way, over the hills and far away. Though kings and tyrants come and go, a voyager's life is all I know. I live to explore another day, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, through mountains, streams, and open plains, the core of discovery makes its way, over the hills and far away. Through unknown land we proceeded on, and through the very walls of hell, but we stood strong and we carried on, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, through mountains, streams, and open plains, the core of discovery makes its way, over the hills and far away. O'er the hills and o'er the main, through mountains, streams, and open plains, the core of discovery makes its way, over the hills and far away.
Every time I shoot. Well, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's get back to tomorrow. Tomorrow is April 7th, 1805. It is the day the Corps of Discovery will leave Fort Mandan to continue the rest of their journey that will take them to their ultimate goal, the Pacific Ocean. They leave at daybreak. Now, can you imagine what the men must be thinking this night as they get into their bunks? Are they thinking about the dangers they might encounter? Do they have a feeling they're stepping into an abyss? This is a great unknown. This land is uncharted, untested. What adventures await? Meriwether Lewis writes in his journal, "This departure is among the happiest in my life." The dark of night is about to be lifted and expose daybreak. A soft breeze caresses the newly swollen buds of the cottonwood, elm, and maple. Oh, there is the perfume of prairie wildflowers in the air. And listen, there is the sweet sound of a lark.
is this that gives my soul all its joyous elation as I hear the sweet lark sing in the clear air of the day?
I often reread the letters my son Meriwether sent to me over the years. I recall especially the years he was gone on the great expedition. The letters he wrote me within 6 months of leaving St. Louis did not arrive until nearly a year had passed. Oh, how I worried about my son's safety on such a dangerous journey into the unknown. In today's world, I just call or text, right? But in 1804, I had no choice but to be patient and hopeful. But these letters eased my mind and were filled with amazing stories and described sights of the most astonishing beauty. But they told me what I most wanted to hear. And that is how my son was utilizing his medical skills. You see, I, Lucy Meriwether Lewis, am a healer of some considerable experience, and I taught my son my medical skills and my knowledge of herbal remedies. You see, it was important for both he and Captain Clark to know as much as possible about cures because there was no doctor traveling with the Corps of Discovery. He also studied with noted physician Dr. Benjamin Rush in preparation, and he writes that he frequently followed Dr. Rush's instructions for bleeding patients, this being his preferred method of treatment for most all ills, everything from fevers to dislocated bones. The problem with getting sick in the early 1800s is that the treatment was often worse than the illness. Dr. Rush also sold my son 600 pills of his own invention and encouraged him to distribute them freely and frequently. Big pharma of the 1800s. But these pills were mercury-based laxatives. And they were so strong that Meriwether's men referred to them as Rush's Thunderbolts. Oh my. Well, these pills rarely helped, and often they made the men sicker than they were to begin with. Now, your Smithsonian Magazine reports that modern historians have been able to trace the exact voyage of the Corps of Discovery by looking for the mercury deposits left behind by the men. Isn't science wonderful? Well, as the only two with any medical skills, Meriwether and Captain Clark were kept busy caring for their men and treating things like dislocated shoulders and sore joints and snake bites and the occasional sunstroke and an outbreak of boils brought on from poor diet and spending too much time in damp clothing. Both of them knew how to lance a boil and apply a mixture of elm bark and cornmeal to the sore, and they knew how to treat a snake bite with the poultice of bark and gunpowder. Now, the drinking water came from the river, each cup half mud and ooze. Nearly all of the men suffered from dysentery. Sadly, Meriwether wrote of the loss of one of his men, a Sergeant Charles Floyd, a young man of much merit. No medical application could save his life. And with today's medical knowledge, they would have known that he suffered from an infected and ruptured appendix. Well, as the weather got colder, some men suffered and were plagued with rheumatism. And when the weather got warmer, all the the men were plagued with mosquitoes, some as large as houseflies. The mosquitoes were so thick that the men could neither hunt nor work as they kept inhaling these mosquitoes into their throats. Oh, how ghastly. For protection during the day, the men covered themselves in bear grease, and at night they were thankful for Meriwether's foresight in purchasing mosquito netting. Other than that, he wrote that the men were stout, healthy, and capable of bearing bodily fatigue. Well, 3 years after returning from the great expedition, my boy died. Of a gunshot wound, they tell me, but the rest cannot be true. They say that he died at his own hand, but this troublesome rumor must be unmasked, as there is clear evidence that he was murdered. Surely your modern forensics can put this terrible mystery to rest. My boy was courageous, a great leader, and has in fact made history. I have not had such a day. Memories plague me. But memories also comfort me. What a life my boy led, and such beauty he saw. Let us sing a song to times long past.
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Je m'appelle Eulalie Choteau. I am the daughter of Auguste Choteau, one of the founders of the city of St. Louis. In 1809, Papa and I had the honor of being witness to the baptism of little Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, son of Sagagawea and Toussaint Charbonneau. Papa's friend, Captain William Clark, invited the Charbonneaus to visit St. Louis and hoped that little Pomp, as he called Jean-Baptiste, would stay with him to be educated and raised under his care. Captain Clark was very fond of Sacagawea and told us how she was of great help on their journey to the Pacific Ocean. He said she made it possible for them to negotiate for horses with the Shoshone tribe, using her knowledge of their sign language. Captain Clark told us the story of how Sacagawea saved their precious journals and supplies when a canoe nearly capsized, and the contents of the boat floated out and into the Russian River, and many more instances where Sacagawea was of great help. Her mere presence was proof to any indigenous tribe they encountered that their expedition was not a war party and had only peaceful intentions. This alone was enough to make her a valued member of the expedition. I was delighted to meet Sacagawea. I found her fascinating and I couldn't get enough of her story. Though the English language was still a bit difficult for her, we found ways to interact with one another. A little English, a little French, a little sign language. She taught me how to say her name without using words. Sacagawea means bird woman in Hidatsa. Communication must have been very difficult for the Corps of Discovery, encountering more than 50 indigenous tribes, all with their unique languages. I asked Sacagawea about the process of interpretation, and she told me how this worked during their encounter with the Nez Perce tribe. It went like this. One of the captains would say a phrase or two in English. One of their French translators would translate in French to Charbonneau, who would translate in Hidatsa to Sacagawea. Sacagawea would translate in Shoshone, and a Shoshone prisoner of the Nez Perce tribe would make the final translation into Nez Perce. Interpretation was so tedious that it could occupy the greater part of the day. Such a life she has lived. She told me of her kidnapping from her Shoshone family when she was just 12 years old and taken to the village of the Hidatsa. She was 16 when she was sold to Toussaint Charbonneau, who later married her, and she was 17 when she gave birth to her first child, Jean-Baptiste, at Fort Mandan. Jean-Baptiste was 3 months old when she left Fort Mandan with the Corps of Discovery, and she carried him across the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean and back. Sacagawea, what a life she lived. Merci et de voir apte. Au revoir.
The accomplishments of the Corps and the explorers were magnificent in every way. Captains Lewis and Clark's careful calculations and fighting river currents and finding trails over towering peaks and meeting and impressing tribe after tribe of Indians demonstrated that they had traveled 7,678 miles. Now, a water passageway, an easy one, was not found, didn't exist. But the passage they mapped out laid the way for fur trade and for future settlement. During their travels, they discovered and documented 178 plant species and 122 animal species that were unknown to us. Now, the area of the Louisiana Purchase west of the Mississippi River was eventually developed into 15 states. Now, I thought all the states should be the same size and perfectly square. Now, that would have meant 64 states in all. Wouldn't that have been better? I also felt that the land should be settled in segments. Let one area fill up before moving on to the next. A nice, orderly transfer of the land. Well, we all know how that turned out. By that time, I was no longer president and had retired to my dear Monticello and beyond. Truth be told, I wasn't really sure what I'd purchased, and Bonaparte wasn't really sure what he sold. It was just a spin of a roulette wheel that paid off big time. It ultimately pushed the border of our country from the Mississippi River west to the Pacific Ocean. It was a vast and rich domain. Now, the land west of the Rockies that was not part of the purchase was ceded to the United States by Britain and Spain in the 1840s. Thus, the United States covered the North American continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Mexico to Canada. The Great Expedition paved the way. Gratitude to the Corps of Discovery for their sense of adventure, their bravery, and their camaraderie. And honor to the many tribes who helped them along the way for their kindness, their generosity, and especially their wisdom.
Well, thank you, each and every one of you, for coming. We hope you enjoyed the show.